So it's been a big week in the tech world with Apple announcing iOS6 coming out of WWDC on Monday. And that's what we're going to focus on today. And for us, probably one of the biggest stories coming out of it is, yes, you've got sort of this new advanced operating system for iPhones, but actually it's kind of the sub-story behind that, which is Apple versus Google. And for those of you who've read Stephen Levy's book about Steve Jobs, well worth a read if you haven't, one of the sort of interesting comments coming out of it was Steve Jobs getting quite irate and believing that Google had sort of stolen the magic of iPhone and put it into Android, and stating that he wanted to go thermonuclear on Google and basically go all out to try and destroy them. So Scott, how do you kind of think iOS 6 has positioned that kind of thermonuclear battle?
It's interesting that it's a lot of the Google features that have been in the iPhone since the start. We're starting to see them coming out. So we think of the original iPhone as a completely closed lockdown platform before they had third-party applications and so on. It came with the Google Maps application, it came with the YouTube application, obviously had the web browser, email and so on. But the Google Maps that is one of the core pieces of what makes the iPhone what it is, pulling that out seems to be quite a big change. So
we're seeing Google Maps being taken out, and in its place Apple are kind of developing their own system based on Thompson technology. Do you think it will be as good?
I can't see any reason why it wouldn't become as good. I think what we'll see with version 1, I mean, what they've got to deliver from the start is something that is on a parity with the old Google Maps, which if you compare what the existing iPhone Google Maps application is to what it was 3 years ago, there's not been a lot of development there.
Whereas actually on the Android, the Maps product is far superior.
So you've got the turn-by-turn navigation, the nice TomTom-like view of where you're going and directional stuff rather than just the view from above. So the fact that Apple will straight away be adding these features that we've seen in Android kind of brings the iPhone Maps up to kind of parity with Google Maps elsewhere. Now, of course, there was the Google shortly before the WWDC conference. Google announced some of the changes they have planned for Google Maps, which presumably they will carry on developing it. They will have new features and so on, and it might take some time for Apple to catch up with the way they're pushing it. But will that matter at the end of the day to most? Most people who buy iPhones nowadays aren't the early adopter geeks and nerds and so on. So if you're buying a new phone today, more likely than not, it will be a smartphone, whether or not you care about these things or not. These people probably don't even know that this is Google Maps behind the Maps application. It's not heavily branded, so the shift from one to another is probably not going to bother them.
And some of the other changes we're seeing where it looks like Apple's sort of starting to lock Google out of the phone in as many places as possible is the introduction of Passbook, which seems to be a direct competitor or an early stage of what will eventually become a direct competitor to Google Wallet, with Passbook allowing you to sort of maintain your loyalty cards, and it doesn't take a huge leap of imagination to believe that in the near future that'll be credit cards brought into that. And we already see with Starbucks, even though it's not a credit card, something like 25% of all Starbucks transactions in the US are done via a mobile phone now. So I think that'll be quite interesting. And I think probably the biggest change is going to be with Siri. And I think Siri kind of moves us into that space where actually Apple's kind of saying, you don't need to go down the traditional open web, let's look at a search and let's get 10 results back. It's actually saying, Siri, I trust you, give me the one answer. So, you know, can Siri replace traditional search?
I don't think it needs to replace it. I mean, it's not that the Google, being involved with the Google experience, using Google for an iPhone user of the future, I don't think they're going to go away. You still need to search the web for, well, if you want to find something on the web, that you know what you're looking for, as opposed to something that you discover that's pushed to you through social media, through advertising, through wherever it is. Google is a great engine at doing that. But whether you need Google to do the finding your directions, the place you want to go to find the opening times of a restaurant, the film times of a cinema, and so on, I think if what Apple deliver is a better way of doing some of those things, that makes the Apple experience stronger than the competitors for those things. So I don't think it's replacing everything. What I think kind of gets interesting is the areas that it is replacing aren't just, it doesn't seem to be just things that Apple think they can do better than Google. It also seems to be areas that are kind of Google's core business. Mm-hmm. So if I want to spend money and use my phone to do it, the fact that Google's getting cut out of those pieces seems to be aggressive. So I think the overall friction between Apple and Google is ultimately it's an open and closed battle, for want of a better word, rather than something that's being driven by that. You know, seeing these companies as people, but there is. It looks like there is a little bit of that.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of niggling going on, and I think one of the fears is actually the niggling becomes so much that we start to see the phones becoming developed so separately that actually it really does become an either-or option. Whereas I think at the moment both phones are kind of helping the other to develop. And we're kind of moving the market forward. If it becomes too fragmented, I think that's when the user will really suffer and you really do get properly locked in. But it'll be interesting how it develops.
Oh, definitely. I think it's an interesting question if you think about, you know, sort of 5 years ago when Google had a seat on Apple board and so on, when they were very much two partners pushing forwards the...
You know, that was until probably, 3 years ago, I think, Schmidt was on the board.
But would you think, if that was still the case and they were working together to make the iPhone, do you think that would have made the iPhone a better device and a better mobile experience?
I have to believe that, yes, it would have done. To have Schmidt involved there. I think
Google on the inside.
Yeah, I think incorporating Google from the very beginning was genius. And I think it'll be very interesting to see, once we start to take Google away from it, can it be as good? You know, Apple is famed for launching, then improving. And it'll be interesting to see how that happens with things like Maps as kind of the early precursor of, you know, now that you're fully into this kind of Apple-only world, is the device actually as good? Or even within a closed system, you still need to be open enough to bring in the best from other places that you can't do.
Because of course this isn't an area that Apple can really afford to fail in.
Yeah.
You know, Maps is such a key part of what you need in your mobile device. Yeah. This is where you are and what's around you and how you connect to those things. If that becomes a weakness of the iPhone against Android phones rather than a strength of smartphones against non-smartphones, that could be quite damaging for Apple.
Definitely. So we look forward to seeing how this develops. Thank you very much.